In today's video, the Focus gets ready for another MOT. I swing a miss with a lump hammer, and the engine struggles to start after a spark plug change.
Hello, welcome back to the Car Lovers channel, and today we're in the Focus. I'll just tell you a bit about it first. I bought it off a mate at work who'd bought it off his neighbour as an MOT failure, but he couldn't be bothered or didn't have the time to do the repairs on it, so he was looking for a mug really to buy it off him, and that was me. So yeah, we're gonna get it fixed up, get it MOT'd, and then we'll run it for 12 months, see if we can get our money back when we come to sell it. We'll do a tally up of anything we spend on it, parts, MOT obviously. Now it cost me 100 quid, which is what the guy I bought it off paid for it, but he'd done some wipers and he'd bought a track rod end with the intention of fixing it, but couldn't be bothered. So I've paid what he paid, and I've got free track rod end to fix it. So yeah, let's see what we've let myself in for, shall we? Have a look at what it failed on. So we're just on the Vehicle Smart app, and if I've already got it saved in my garage, if I click on it here, look, we can have a look at the MOT right there. End of November's when it failed. So front wipers, which have already been done. Near side front brake is binding, and I can tell you it is from driving it. It's horrendous. Probably done about a mile in it, and the stench off them burning brake pads was was quite bad. Obviously the track rod end there, that's also on the near side front, but we've got that. The main thing really is going to be the emissions. Seeing if we can get it through the emissions. Now it's also got a bit of a misfire, bit of a stutter when you're under load, when you're driving. I'm hoping it's a coil pack or a set of plugs, but we'll have to look into that to diagnose it. Rear number plate's nothing, and then the advisor is front number plate. We'll probably do that as well. A tyre, I might have one knocking around. Front discs, front exhaust, brake pipe, and fuel tank straps. So yeah, that is what we need to be getting on with. We'll do the top 6 first, send it in for an MOT. Hopefully it doesn't fail on anything else. If it does, we'll have to get on with it. But yeah, that's where we're at. So let's get on with some work. First things first, put my gloves on. Now we're ready.
And we're just going to jack the car up and support it with axle stands, obviously, just on the corner that we're working on. Get your power tools ready. If we just look at this wheel, see how this wheel is pretty solid. Now it's either going to be sliders, the pads could be seized in the carrier, but it could be the piston itself. We won't know till we get in there. Just flick the centre cap out, and then find your locking wheel nut key. Took me a while to find it, as I've only just got the car. And then we'll whip these wheel nuts off and see what we can see.
Hello?
Once your wheel's off, to make access a bit easier, just lock your steering round and then remove the dust caps for these caliper sliders. If you can't pop them out with your hands, just a small flat blade screwdriver will do the job. Then grab a socket, they're usually a 7mm Allen key, and a ratchet, or if you've got one, battery ratchet, just speeds the whole process up. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. I think that top one was lefty tighty, righty tighty. Well, it doesn't look like these sliders are causing the issue. So once we get this caliper off, we can check the pads. Sometimes the pads get stuck in the carrier itself. From what I think, it's probably going to be the piston. Sometimes the rubber boot around the piston splits, dirt and water start to make its way in, cause corrosion. That's likely to be what's happened. Now you want to grab a long flat blade screwdriver or a pry bar like what I have here. We're just going to work the piston, work the caliper top to bottom, just to try and release it from the hub assembly. Make sure the clip is completely out of the way, it's not holding the caliper in, which I think was the case here. Then we'll just pop the pad out of the piston. Just a quick inspection, and then remove the outer pad from the carrier. Both them pads fine, which means the likely cause is the piston. So we've got some penetrating oil here, and we're just going to peel back the rubber and apply plenty of this penetrating oil under the dust cover for the piston. Whilst the penetrating oil is in your hand, it's a good idea to apply some to the lock nut for the track rod end and the nut for the ball joint as well, seeing as we're going to have to undo that anyway later in the day. Right, so I've got a piston wind back tool here. I'm just going to use to push the piston back into the caliper. Hopefully we should get a rough idea of how seized this piston is, depending on how difficult it is to wind back. So if we just wind the spreader all the way up to the caliper, lock it out, and then just start turning, and we'll speed this up for you. Now the piston has been wound all the way back. We need to bring it back out again, and the only way to do that is by pressing the brake pedal. Now this is a bit risky. If you're a bit inexperienced, there's a chance you could pop the piston right out of the caliper, and that's going to be the worst thing you could do. You'll lose a lot of brake fluid, so the brakes will need bleeding, but worse than that, there's a chance you might not get the piston back into the caliper. What I've done is used the wind back tool as a stop for the piston so that it can't come all the way out. Now we're just going to apply some more penetrating oil and then repeat the process of winding it in, pumping it back out, winding it in, pumping it back out. You're probably wondering why we're taking the time and effort to mess around doing this instead of buying a new caliper for 50 quid. Well, it's a cheap car challenge, so if we can do this and it gets it through the MOT, it's not cost a penny. Also, I've done this on a few customers' cars that have been a bit strapped for cash, couldn't afford, didn't want to put a caliper on their particular vehicle, and I've always been intrigued at how long this fix actually lasts, so I'll keep you updated on this Focus. This piston seems to have eased up some now, so we're going to reassemble these brake pads, make sure the securing clip is fitted correctly, and then pop the caliper back on, refit the sliders, pop the dust covers back in for the sliders, and the crucial thing, don't forget to pump the brake pedal out before you set off driving, because you'll go to stop and you'll have no brakes. Been there, done that, shat me undies. Next, we're just going to lock this steering round completely the opposite direction so we can get access to the track rod end. Track rod end replacement is probably the easiest job we've got on the Focus. All we've got to do is remove 2 nuts and then do a bit of counting. The only issue will be if the track rod end is seized on the steering arm, and that could cause us some problems. Let's hope this one isn't. Once you have removed the nut on the ball joint and freed off the lock nut for the steering arm, you want to grab a hammer. The other one I had to hand was this lump hammer. We just want to aim for this section of the hub assembly, and that's going to break the taper of the ball joint and hopefully release it. Did you see that accuracy? Let me slow that down for you. The brake disc took a wallop in there, although the ball joint did come free with the first strike. Now you might have noticed I wound the old nut back on the ball joint a couple of threads earlier in the video, and that is so that if you do miss hit with the hammer, the threads for the ball joint aren't damaged. You can still tighten the nut up, although it doesn't matter for this one as we're replacing it. It's just a habit I've got into, one of my better habits. So now we're going to count the track rod end off the steering arm, and this is going to keep the wheel alignment roughly the same as where it was, although I would advise getting the tracking checked and adjusted after replacement. Before you fit the new track rod end, it's a good idea just to quickly compare it to the old one. Make sure it's the same length and shape as the track rod ends on these Focuses are handed. So make sure you've got a left hand track rod end if that is the side that you're replacing. Now that we've counted the track rod end back on, it's time to refit it into the hub assembly, and then don't forget to tighten up the lock nut. I like to get the threads started by hand so that we don't risk cross threading them, and then I'll do them up with my impact gun and then just double check the tightness of the nut with a standard 1/2 inch ratchet. As I said earlier, it's worth getting your tracking checked so that you don't cause unnecessary uneven tyre wear. If that is what you're going to do, it's also maybe worth your while making sure the track rod end on the other side is nice and free, so that when the garage come to do it, they're not going to be charging you extra labour to free off a seized track rod end. And with that lock nut nipped up, all that leaves is putting the wheel back on, dropping it down, then we can move on to looking at why the emissions are too high. So now we move on to the under bonnet repairs, and this can be a bit of a minefield, working out why emissions are too high or too low. Can be anything from worn spark plugs or fuel injectors to oil seeping into the combustion chamber via piston rings, valve stem seals or head gasket. Could also be catalytic converter that's past its best, oxygen sensor faults, or other numerous issues. What I'm going to do is work with the symptoms that I've got, and they were misfire and hesitation under acceleration. Now this is pointing me towards a spark plug or coil pack issue, so we'll whip these plugs out, see what state they're in. One thing I will say is that for a 119,000 mile engine, these spark plug ports are exceptionally clean. Usually on these Zetec engines, water ingress occurs and this causes rust build up and the spark plugs tend to corrode, and these spark plug ports end up orange and brown, but this is like new aluminium. Here we have an old 1600 petrol engine from a Fiesta project that I had a while back, and when this was on the road it had a new coil pack and plugs fitted, so we're going to pinch these, pop them in the Focus and see if it makes any difference to the running of it. Before we unbolt this coil pack, it's a good idea to make note of which plug lead goes to which spark plug. Handily, Ford number each lead on the coil pack for you. I always like to double check that these numbers correspond to the matching spark plug. Don't forget to disconnect the wiring harness, and then there's 4 bolts that hold it on, and they're all Torx 25s, so that's what we've got here. Well, that's the coil pack replaced. Now we just want to trace each plug lead back from the spark plug and fit it onto the correct outlet on the ignition coil. When refitting the plug leads, you want to make sure that you press them firmly into the coil and onto the spark plugs. You should hear a click or a pop to let you know that they've been seated correctly. Try remembering to plug the ignition coil in at the first time of asking, or you'll end up with starting problems like this. So let's plug that ignition coil back in and try again.
It's alive. Right, that's all for today. The next thing we need to do is take it up to work, get it on the emissions tester to see if that coil pack and then plugs have made any difference to the emissions. Wheel alignment needs doing, and then hopefully, if all them are good, we can get it in for an MOT and it'll pass. So until next time, that's it. Bye.
Like, share, subscribe. The Car Lovers channel.